I've been quite busy recently with amateur astronomy and astrophotography. I hesitated to put anything about my astronomical efforts up on YouTube, as there are currently many excellent amateur astronomy channels on YouTube, maintained by people with much more sophisticated equipment and techniques than I can rise to, offering excellent advice and help and producing images much better than anything I can produce. However, I've been quite excited by my recent return to astronomy and by what can be done with some of the latest equipment. And this channel has always been just about sharing my enjoyment of my hobbies and interests with friends, family, and anyone else with a similar bent, as it were. So I am going to be putting up some videos featuring the results of my astronomical efforts. Mostly my intention is just to post some images I've been able to produce and to discuss how they were taken, and a little about the nature of the astronomical objects featured and the history of their observation. I've always been keen on the historical aspect of any area of interest I pursue. I'm not going to offer anyone advice, as others are already doing an excellent job of that and I'm no expert. However, I am absolutely happy to answer any questions anyone might have about how my images were produced or about the astronomical objects featured, inasmuch as I am able to answer. A little bit of personal history tied into the progress of amateur astronomy over the last few decades. I've always been interested in astronomy in general. At one point in my youth I even considered going into cosmology as a profession, but I had doubts as to whether my math ability would be up to it, though I did get a place to study maths at Cambridge. And anyway, I had other interests, and ultimately I went in a different direction educationally and professionally. But my interest in astronomy didn't wane, and when I had started a family and was established in a job working in IT, which turned out to be my fate, and I had a little spare time and cash, I got into practical observing. Actually, I first bought a small refractor telescope, basically as an educational gift for my daughter. That was the plan. That scope turned out to be rubbish, as I'm afraid a lot of cheap scopes aimed at casual interest often are, but my interest was piqued, and it wasn't very long before I graduated to a Meade 8-inch Schmidt-Cassegrain, and got into some fairly serious efforts at observing, and progressively from that I got into astrophotography, using a film camera, either photographing through the scope, as seen here, or piggybacked on the scope using a lens on the camera itself, like this, and all manually guided by constantly adjusting to keep a guide star in the crosshair of the guiding eyepiece. Eventually, I upgraded to a 10-inch Meade Schmidt-Cassegrain, which in hindsight was a mistake, as I had to observe it at remote sites, and the larger scope was considerably harder to transport and set up, which, combined with my advancing age and other issues, discouraged me from getting out with it. I largely lapsed from practical astronomy for a while, whilst maintaining my interest, so I never worked with the earliest generations of amateur electronic imaging cameras, nor with the earliest generations of go-to scopes. I only got back into practical astronomy when I saw what the latest generation of smart scopes offer to the amateur astronomer. I was very impressed with how far this type of equipment had come, and with the results I saw produced, and I figured that even currently in my 70s and with various health issues, I should be able to work with these newest smart scopes. And I was correct. It's been quite a rewarding journey, and I want to share some of my results here on this channel. I want to conclude this introduction by showing a few of the results that I was able to get on film back in the 1980s and 1990s, and comparing those with results I've been able to get recently using smart scopes. Here's an image of M51, the Whirlpool galaxy, that I took back in the late 1980s using a film camera through a Meade 8-inch Schmidt-Cassegrain scope with ASA 3200 film, 20 minutes hand-guided. And here's an image of the same subject, M51, processed from 15 minutes worth of 15-second frames, captured with my Celestron Origin Smart Scope on January the 26th, 2025. Here's an image of M27, the Dumbbell Nebula, also taken on ASA 3200 film through the Meade 8-inch, this time a 20-minute hand-guided exposure using a duoband filter. And here's an image of the same subject, M27, processed from 5 minutes worth of frames captured with my Celestron Origin Smart Scope on May the 9th, 2025, also using a duoband filter. Here's an image of the Lagoon Nebula, M8, ASA 3200 film, 20-minute hand-guided exposure through the Meade 8-inch with a duoband filter. Got lost there. And here's the Lagoon Nebula again, processed from 10 minutes worth of frames captured with my Celestron Origin on May the 9th, 2025. Here's the Omega Nebula M17 from my efforts in the 1980s. 20 minutes on ASA 3200 film through the Meade 8-inch with a nebula filter. And here's the Omega Nebula, processed from 15 minutes worth of frames captured with the Celestron Origin on May the 9th, 2025. Here's an image from the 1990s of the Eagle Nebula M16, 20 minutes on ASA 3200 film through the Meade 8-inch with a nebula filter, hand-guided of course. And here's the Eagle Nebula, processed from 15 minutes worth of frames captured with the Origin on May the 9th, 2025, also with a duoband filter. Here's a wide-field image of Orion taken back in the day with an SLR camera with a 135mm lens fitted, piggybacked on the Meade 8-inch, guided 5-minute exposure. I can't take images quite this wide field with any of my current smart scopes. You can just make out the Horsehead and Flame nebulae near the leftmost stars of Orion's belt. And here's about the best image of M42, the Great Orion Nebula, that I managed back in the day. 15 minutes on 3200 ASA film through the Meade 8-inch with a duoband filter. Here's an image of M42, the Great Orion Nebula, M43, the round bit just above M42, and the Running Man Nebula, the separate part just above that, processed from 15 minutes worth of frames captured with my Vespera Pro Smart Scope on March the 23rd, 2025. And here's the Running Man Nebula, the nebula at the top of that previous image, processed from 15 minutes worth of frames captured with my Celestron Origin on March the 26th, 2025. No filter, so as to bring out the reflection nebulosity. And here's an image of the Horsehead and Flame nebulae, processed from 15 minutes worth of frames captured with the Vespera Pro on March the 10th, 2025, duoband filter. And finally, from the 1980s, here's a black and white image of the North America Nebula and surrounding region, 15 minutes of exposure on 200 ASA film through a 135mm lens on an SLR piggybacked on the Meade 8-inch. The mess on the left is just because I couldn't get the album to lie flat in the scanner. And here's an image of the North America Nebula processed from an hour's worth of frames captured with my Dwarf 3 Smart Scope on April the 17th, 2025 with an IR cut filter, not duoband. Well, there's no need to flog this to death, but I think this does illustrate the remarkable progress in what an amateur astronomer with limited means and abilities might hope to achieve. And it's also worth taking into consideration that capturing those old images involved a lot more grueling work than is required with the modern smart scopes. Going forward from here, I'm intending to just post some of my recent imaging results with notes on how the image was captured, the nature of the object depicted, and something of the history of its discovery and observation. But if there's anything else in this area that you'd like me to show or tell, please let me know in the comments below, and I'll try to oblige.